Well, g'day, Jono Break here. Hope you're doing well. As you can see, I'm sitting down in my backyard and just enjoying the beautiful summer weather. And if anyone wants to start something in alternative to Facebook, please let me know. That has as many people out there. Man, these guys have gotten diabolical in their ability to make it simple to do stuff. Anyway, so today we're talking about the customer, and we've been doing a theme this week around bootstrapping, the simplicities of starting a business, running your business, and so forth. So we've talked a lot about marketing. We had some people on to talk about their bootstrapping journey, and so that's where we want to sort of pick up today. And today do a conversation about customers. Now, one of the things that I find a lot in a startup is there's a lot of excitement around the product or the service or the offering, and often the customer is kind of, oh well, once we get that service or offering, because we're so excited at it, because we believe it's such a game changer, the customer will just fall in line, right? So, and then they'll point to maybe even like Facebook, which probably has a limited life now. But then they'll point to things like, well, what about Uber? Well, Uber actually came from another ride-sharing company, and ride-sharing really just came out of mixing taxis with the internet, and so beautifully. But that's pretty much it, So when we start looking at the customer, we've got to think about, well, what are we targeting? Because it's not just about how we shape the product; it's also how we shape our story, right? And so this is one of the things that I like to sort of talk about in terms of how we talked about story a few weeks back, how you craft your story and the importance of that. But today we're going to talk about, as I said, customer. We're going to talk about a few aspects. Now, if you're familiar with the business model canvas, and we'll hopefully get an example of that up. Actually, Linda wrote a fantastic book or a fantastic workbook on quarterly execution planning. And the last towards the end, about 5 or 6 pages, actually outlines the questions, and some of which we'll cover today. Now, it's a total visual map of your business, right? So it looks at all sorts of resources, it looks at who's involved, it looks at products that you're developing and so forth. But it also has 3 or 4 segments on the customer. And so they're the questions we're actually going to focus on today. That's what we're going to look at today. And so I'm going to go through some of those questions with you. We will put these up in a post later today, both here on the LinkedIn page. If you haven't joined our LinkedIn Business in Bare Feet page, I encourage you to go and do that. Linda maybe can pop up a link to that. And then we're also on Instagram as well. So we'll look at some ways of getting that out to you today. So the first thing when we look at customers is the customer segment. All right. So when we start thinking about the customer segment, who are we actually creating value for? All right. So remember we talked about, the story, and part of telling a great story is that customer avatar. It's who is your customer? What are they doing? What are they going on about, and so forth. So who are we creating value for? Okay. So if you think about some of the great businesses out of there, what did they actually create value for? Okay, so what about your business? What are you creating value, or who are you creating value for? Who's your ideal customer? Because a lot of what can happen is if we don't understand our own sense of value, that can often lead us to chasing every single customer under the sun, and often ones that really don't have great value for us at all. So have a think about that today. Who are we creating value? What value do we think they're looking for? Okay, so this is where research may come into it. Okay, you might want to actually find out what the customer values, how they're valuing it. Hey Darren, good to see you, mate. And late night there in Australia. And so how do we verify that, right? So I remember working for a company, and we were developing some software which really, at the end of the day, looked like time billing, project management. It was online, which, in the late 90s, early 2000s was pretty cool. And so we found that as we started to describe the product to our ideal customer, which was small to medium companies, they went, oh, that's just project management software. Well, no, it's more than that. Oh, it's time billing software. It's a bit more than that. It's all these sorts of things. And so this is where you've got to understand, well, what is the customer thinking of your product? Okay, or your offering. So when we talk about product, offering, service, whatever it might be, because it doesn't matter how great you are at thinking about your product. What does the customer think? And then how do you shape the story? How do you shape the journey to deliver your amazing product to the customer based on the story they're telling themselves about you anyway, okay? Who are our most important customers? I talked about this just a second ago. We've got to decide who we're going after. I was on a live pitch party call yesterday, and it was interesting for me because I find often with pitching, and particularly the pitch party sort of environment, they're fairly early, they're fairly embryonic, and so they can be very wide in their application, and they maybe haven't thought through the market so much. But targeting is going to become very important. You can't afford to have conversations with everybody. You don't want to have conversations with everybody. And so you need to understand who your most important customers are. Now, I tend to break my clients' customers down into primary, which is the A-list customers. They're going to be most profitable, most fun. They're going to teach us the most about our business. They're going to help us grow and develop. Then there's the B customers. So they're probably going to be a bit harder to keep. But they're still there and they're still part of the journey. We can maybe turn them into an A customer. Maybe they grow over time. So for example, my primary market in my consulting company, my coaching business, is to work with small to medium companies. But that doesn't mean I don't work with startups. And that's part of the reason why I'm here, is because I think there is a beautiful journey for startups, and there's frameworks you can use to work with those people. So you've got to understand where your customers are and who are the most important. I then call it the tertiary. I use the acronym EMAD, E-M-A-D, which is every man and his dog. So if Daka's watching this, there we go. We've even got Daka and Blizzy, our chief happiness officers, in there. And so every man and his dog is basically, these are the people that pick up on our marketing. We may not have intentionally connected with them, but they've connected with us and they become a great advocate. Okay, it's a little bit accidental, but they're still there, and they may tell their friends, and they may end up becoming secondary or primary customers. Okay, so understand who are our most important customers. They're the ones we should be going after first, and be careful just to not to think about the A customers as the biggest ones or the ones that seem to have the most budgets. I've found traditionally in my world that the biggest customers, like the multi-billion-dollar clients, are the ones that screw you down the most. Okay, so just be aware of that. You don't have to, and not only that, I mean, the ones that I've actually worked with, some that are great as well, but it's a long sales cycle for those sorts of people. Whereas a small and medium company, they can be more agile, they can think quickly, you can build relationships with them. So don't just think just because they're a DuPont or they're a Eli Lilly or they're a some of those big brands, whatever, that they've got money and they're going to be easy to deal with. They can take a long time, and they're often looking at 200 or 300 people like you. Okay, so just be aware of that. And they can also be a bit of a challenge in terms of getting money out of them. Even though they can be regular cash flow, they can take, some of them are now doing payment terms of 120 days, which is, all my small business customers are all within 25 days without fail. So you need to just think through not just the ideal customer, but how you're going to get paid, how's it going to affect your cash flow, what are they doing, how you're going to make the most difference. I'm working on a product at the moment called Results on Purpose, and it's designed for small to medium manufacturers. And it's interesting because we thought, well, do we go into big manufacturers? It's like, well, they'd be cool and they'd maybe pay us more, but at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to make a huge difference there. We could maybe help one individual, but the overall company, we're not going to help. So as part of what we want and as part of what we think is the ideal customer for us is the small to medium manufacturers. So just have a think about who you're targeting and what you're doing there. So, there are a couple of segments here: mass market, are you niched, or as they say in America, are you niched? Are you segmented? Are you a complicated product? You need to think through all of those things in terms of the kind of customer that you're going for. What's your value proposition? Now, this one's a big one. We could probably do a call on our own on value proposition. So what is it we deliver to the customer? And before you jump in and say, well, here's my product, this is what I deliver, that's not what we're delivering. Okay, what are you really delivering to your customer? And this is where the discussion perhaps of features versus benefits comes into play. So, often we get caught in these arguments, particularly in marketing, on features versus benefits. And so a feature is how a customer interacts with something. It's what they feel, it's what they think. It's how it helps them better their life, better their journey, their business, whatever. The benefit Sorry, sorry, that's the benefit. Oh my goodness, getting myself confused here. The features are the aspects of that product. You know, it goes faster, it's a better color, it has more buttons and lights, it has, you know, whatever it might be. And so we need to think about those things. So what is our value proposition? Now, it's really interesting. I was at a cybersecurity conference a bunch of years ago. I used to work in the cybersecurity space as a marketing guy. And I was talking with Procter & Gamble at a conference in London. And they took me over to a cabinet and they showed me all these, you know, Colgate, I think it's Colgate toothpaste or whatever toothpaste they make, and all their brands. And they said, what do you think of all these brands? I said, yeah, they're really cool. They said, these are products we're not releasing for another month. Okay. Now, what you're looking at is the ripoff that basically came out of China in that case. These are Chinese ripoffs that are already on the market of the product we're not releasing for another month. So I kind of came up with the tagline that, you know, you can make something, you know, you can make something as copy-proof as possible, but the Chinese have probably already copied it. And it's not to be racist against Chinese, they come up with amazing stuff, and they've really locked down their copyright laws over the years. This was quite some time back, but at the end of the day, there's someone out there who can do it faster, better, quicker. And so at the end of the day, that's where you need to have a unique value proposition. And particularly in my world where it's very much around people, then you are the value proposition. And that's why your culture, your time, your effort needs to come through in all of that. So what are the customer needs we're satisfying? Which one of our customers' problems are we helping solve? Again, making sure you chunk it down and you target it well. Okay, so you're not going to try and solve everything. Now, that doesn't mean that somewhere down the track that you don't have a division. You know, when I think about results on purpose, it would work in any business at all, okay? But we've decided to target small to medium manufacturing, logistics, that sort of space. Down the track, we may find that insurance companies like us more, or the banks want to use us more. And so we would actually divisionalize the business in a way that actually targets those areas. And that's very common, keeping the business unified, keeping the culture true. Okay, so which one of our customers' problems? Or maybe it's more than one. But we've got to be concise, okay? The trick is be concise, keep it clear, keep it simple, all right? What bundles of products, okay? So there may be some additional stuff. The trick is, and I've been guilty of this myself, the trick is not to come in and overwhelm the customer, all right, with everything that you've got and everything that you can do. A lot of software companies do this well by offering a simple entry level, maybe even free product. You know, we've been looking at to solve some of these problems we're having here. We've been looking at some streaming services, and there's a couple that offer it for free. It's pretty basic. Of course, none of them interact well with Facebook, which is no surprise. but you know, then we can look at getting used to the software. I've done the same with podcasting, getting used to the software, and then taking it to the next level from there, and paying for it as you build your audience. When it comes to creating value, often our unique proposition lies within each of us. So your culture will reflect you, your business will reflect you, and that's okay, because that'll actually be the most comfortable sweet spot for you and your business anyway. So don't be afraid of that. So we start looking at things like performance, customizing, status, cost or risk reduction, okay, convenience, price, service. What are the things that your value proposition represents? And then one of them, the next thing is, what are the customer relationships we're going to have? Okay, so what kind of relationships does each of our customer segments expect us to have with them? Okay, so if I'm providing a free, well, we are providing a free product here, but you know, there's an element of service that customer expects. But then there are people who go in behind our paywall and interact with Sandtrax, and they get a whole different level of connection and response. Especially from Linda, who's amazing at this, but they get a whole different level of response. They get access to mentors, almost one-to-one, which you don't get here in the broader community. You get access to them in general, and so there is that aspect of, you know, it's almost like you get what you pay for, right? And so, what sort of relationship do customers expect? And if we weren't providing that, then customers would leave as well. And so think about the businesses you've interacted with, and the ones that are actually asking for feedback and operating on that, I think are very, very good. Which customer relationships do you already have that are established? These are great, and I always say that the best, and I mentioned this in the bootstrapping episode with John Jones a few weeks back. I said, you know, the best investor is a customer. a good paying customer. As they invest in your journey, you're able to grow your journey organically, hang on to more control of your business, get it to a stage where it's then attractive to investors and you're not giving so much of your business away. So which people around you are already established, and what are they looking for? What do they want from you? And how do you build that so that you can then continue to build your business out into more customers like that? Getting referrals from them is another way to do that. How does this integrate into the business model? So this is where we've got to look at, okay, so the business model still matters. What we're offering, it's got to work, right? It's got to work in that context. It's got to be able to provide what that customer needs, and then it's got to fit the model that we're actually providing and doing, okay? So have a think about that. And do we know how much it costs to get a customer? We hear about this customer acquisition quite a lot, and it seems to be a little easier to do when you're talking about online communities and online products and so forth. It's a little harder when you start talking about, okay, I've got to have sales reps and I've got a physical product that I'm producing. But have a think about that. What is the cost of your customer acquisition? Because that's going to tell you a little bit about your marketing budget as well. Okay, because you've got to have a percentage set aside. The amount of businesses I started with that had, they'd spend $200,000 or $300,000 on developing a product and then spend nothing on marketing. It's just crazy. Marketing has to be part of your development cycle. It has to be part of your business cycle. And that's where, this customer segmentation comes into it. And then the last thing I want to talk today about is the channels that you're going to work with your customers. Okay. So the first one, so first question is then, well, through which channels do our customer segments want to be reached? I have customers that like text messaging. I have customers that like emails. I've got customers that like talking on the phone and would rather talk on Zoom. Some would rather not. I've got customers that don't go on Facebook at all. We've got customers that only spend their time on LinkedIn. So there's different areas. So where are your customers and how do they prefer to be connected with? And what style, right? So obviously once you find a style, as I said, there's text messaging, there's video, there's blogs, there's information, there's white papers, there's websites. There's so many different ways you could connect and communicate and create a presence. Then how do you actually, what's the actual vehicle to deliver that? Okay, so we've all discovered Zoom in this season and how useful it can be, and some people are even getting a little zoomed out right now. How are we reaching them, and are we reaching them now? And so we think about, go back to that ideal customer. Are we reaching them now, and how are we reaching them, and is it working? Do we need to replicate that? Do we need to find ways to improve that? And that plays back into some of the constant improvement in the business as well. How do our channels integrate? Okay, so this is coming down to a little bit of a discussion about branding. Again, we could talk about branding for another hour, but at the end of the day, and one of the things I studied at university in my master's was integrated communications. In fact, my degree name was changed to a Master of Integrated Marketing the following year. And so this whole integration, so are people having a consistent experience across all your channels? And this is where syndication and streaming services, simulcast services on video, which we're looking at here, broadcast, posting mechanisms, they can all help, like Buffalo, Hootsuite, those sorts of things, can just get your message out consistently so the same conversation is going out on all the channels at the same time or at the right times for those channels. So have a think about that. How do your channels integrate? How do you create a consistent approach? Which one of our channels work best? This is where we can do not just A/B testing in terms of a sales letter, but we can A/B test in terms of the channels that we use. At the end of the day, we've found Facebook has been a better channel for us, but LinkedIn is really increasing right now. And so, we're finding we're getting a lot of conversation happening there as well, and a lot of kudos in that space, which really for this community is probably a better space. But Facebook allows us to have a bit more creative, a bit more colorful conversations, right? And so that's where we've got to look at, well, which ones are the best and which ones are the most efficient. And social media is not always the most efficient. You can spend a lot of time, and we do, and Linda in particular, spends a lot of time making sure this community, these pages keep running and growing. And at the end of the day, if you're not getting customers, if you're not growing, if you're not delivering on the content, then it's not efficient, right? So it may be better off to go and get that one customer who will pay you thousands of dollars a month just to hang about with you and do your business stuff, rather than a bunch of customers paying $50 a month or whatever it might be. So you just got to think about that, which ones work best, how the channels are most efficient, and how we communicate and connect. Okay. And do our channels suit all customer modes or all customer levels? All right. So remember we talked about primary, secondary, tertiary customers. Okay. So that's where we sort of think, well, do they? Excuse me. I'll just put this down. Do those channels all suit? So a couple of things to think about there: your customer channels, your customer journey, your ideal customers, how you add value to them. These are things we need to think about today. All right. And if you're not doing these things, then I would stop what you're doing right now and actually have a time to stop and think about that, and to write some stuff down and to think about what's my ideal customer. Now that doesn't have to be an end client. That could be an investor you're pitching to, or a group of investors, or it could be a community that you're connecting with. Whatever it might be, think about them as a customer. Think about them. And Joe McIver from Wollongong, how are you, mate? And think about how it's all going, and then come back and look at your business and how do we adapt and how do we adjust those things to be able to then really say, okay, yep, we're on the right track, or this is where we need to pivot and adjust. And there's a lot of pivoting going on right now, right? But this is something we need to have a think about. So as you're thinking about today, your business, all the stuff you're developing, think about your customer. All right, put them at the center of the story. Remember, go back a few weeks and look at our storytelling videos. If you can't find them, send us a link. Well, actually, maybe we can put a link to the YouTube video, Linda, in here. And but then, go and have a think about how you're connecting with them. What are the channels? What's the value you're bringing, and how that fits into your business model? Okay, that's all we've got to talk about today. If no one's got any questions, we'll sign off here. I look forward to answering more of your questions throughout the day as we come. We'll get some of the summary of what we've talked about up online, here, LinkedIn, and on Instagram. I look forward to chatting with you. I'm Jonathan Brake. As always, enjoy the journey.